Okay, so it's time for my end of week or weekly wrap up reading vlog. Today, we are doing week 2 for May 2020, and it's been an interesting week. So if you missed my first week 1 of May 2020 wrap up, then what you missed were 3 amazing books that I gave 5 stars to. It was an amazing start to my month. And then we got to week 2, and week 2 was, well, interesting is the only way to describe it. Let's get right into all the things that I read this week. But before we do that, I quickly just wanted to jump in here and say that I apologize for not putting out a midweek reading vlog. I ended up getting really far behind in my reading schedule. I got a little bit worried about that as well, and because of that I didn't do a midweek reading vlog, so I apologize for that. Hopefully they'll be back next week. We'll see how we go. Alright, now let's get on to what I read this week for week 2 of May 2020. Our weekly wrap up begins right now. Okay, so the first book that I read in week 2 of May 2020 was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. It was amazing to be back in this world once again. For those of you who don't know, on my May TBR, I am reading the first 4 books in the Harry Potter series, and I'm reading 1 book each week. So last week I read The Philosopher's Stone, last week, and this week I read The Chamber of Secrets. This was a fun book to read. I had a few issues with it, but it still did receive 5 stars. I would have to say that this is probably my least favourite book in the series. However, in saying that, I'm judging each book on their own merits as opposed to judging them comparatively to the other books. And so therefore, judging this book on its own merits, I did give it 5 stars. This is a middle grade fantasy, and the premise of the book is that Harry is in his 2nd year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. While he is at home before he goes back to school, he's visited by a creature that is a house elf by the name of Dobby, who warns Harry not to go back to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry this year because there is a plot for terrible things that are going to happen, and it kind of leads on from there. I found this book to be a really enjoyable read. My only issue with this book is that there are a ton of plot conveniences, but I can't really hold that too much against the book because I do firmly believe that it is a middle grade, and I have found in my experience of middle grade books that I've read this year that plot conveniences happen all the time. It's almost the standard for middle grade, so I can't really hold that against it. So it was a 5-star read, and I really enjoyed myself, and if you'd like to see my full review of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, you can go to my Harry Potter playlist option. Is that what we're calling it these days? In my playlist, you can click on the Harry Potter playlist, and you can see that over there. It was a half-hour review, spoiler-free and spoiler, so go ahead and check that out, and let me know what you think. But have you read this book? If you have, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. The second book that I picked up this week was The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. You can see there's a bookmark in there, and there is for a reason. I got about this far into it, which is pretty much the halfway mark, before opting to DNF this book. Now, I was really, surprised, I guess, that I ended up DNFing this book, but okay. If I rewind back to prior to starting to read this book, I thought I was going to go into this book and really enjoy it, and it has come very highly recommended. A lot of people tend to love this series, so I thought I would as well. And I gave it a really good go. In fact, this book is a tome, so when I say I got halfway, I got to page 357 before I DNF'd it, so I gave it a fair go. My big problem with this book is the writing style. It is a hard writing style for me to read, and that took me out of the world really quickly. I also found that I wasn't at all invested in the characters. Yeah, and I wasn't enjoying my reading experience with this at all. I wanted to, trust me, I wanted to, but it just wasn't working, and yeah, by the time I got to the point that I got up to, I thought, well, at least I'm over halfway, and found out I was just at the halfway mark, and there was no way I was going to read another half of this book. It just didn't work for me. Now, I'm not going to say that James Islington isn't a good writer and that he has written... I'm not going to say that he has written a terrible book, but his book was certainly not, written for me. I'm not the target audience for this one. I love fantasy, I really do, especially high fantasy, which is fantasy that takes place in a world that's not our own, which this does, but the writing style was just way too complicated for me. And, look, it's not to say I can't read complicated writing styles, I can, but the problem with complicated writing styles and flowery writing, which I found this work to be, you may not, but I definitely did, is that I found myself very easily distracted from this book, and I would go through chapters only realizing when I got to the next chapter, oh, I've been distracted this whole time and I don't even remember what just happened. So I can't even really tell you much about this book at all. I think the premise is that there is a magical being, or there are magical beings that are called gifted or something like that, and they have to do a test or something to work out if they're worthy to hang on to or not, and if they fail, they become a shadow, and if they pass, they go on to do other things, and I'm sorry, it just didn't work for me, but I gave it a red hot go. I got to the halfway mark, which I'm proud of, with a tome book that goes over 500 pages. It's more like 600 and something odd pages. So I'm proud of the fact that I made it to the halfway mark, but I wasn't enjoying myself at all with this book. So I did DNF it. And it is what it is, but there are many reviews on this book, so I'm sure if you check out BookTube and type in the Shadow of What Was Lost review, you will find reviews out there. So I think actually, I think Murphy did a review. I don't know if she did, but I think she did. Either Murphy, or I would recommend Elliot Brooks. She does some really good reviews, and I think Elliot Brooks did review the Shadow of What Was Lost. But anyway, as far as the Shadow of What Was Lost is concerned, what was lost was me reading this book, because it just didn't work for me. So my apologies to James Islington. I just couldn't get over the writing style, and I couldn't get invested in the characters. But that doesn't mean I don't recommend it to you guys. If you're okay to deal with a tough writing style, and you're okay with taking your time to try and see if you're going to be invested in the characters, then I definitely recommend that you read it, but it just wasn't for me. So let's move on to the third book that I read in the second week of May, and that third book that I read was this book, My Dark Vanessa. And this book is written by Kate Elizabeth Russell. Okay, so if you saw my May TBR, you would know that I knew full well going into this book that it was not going to be an easy book to read. This book is a psychological fiction, and the premise of this book is that there is a girl who goes away to a boarding school. She ends up falling in love with her professor, and they have a relationship. It is a dual perspective, so what that means is that you see through the eyes of more than one character. However, in this instance, it is the same character. It's just that you get the perspective of Vanessa while she's going through the relationship with this teacher. You also get the perspective of Vanessa years after the relationship has ended. So yeah, I really did appreciate that. There are no actual chapters in this book, but the book does seem to be separated into years, so the year gives you an idea of whether it's young Vanessa or older Vanessa. And I really appreciated this book. It was a hard book to read at times, so I am going to give you a trigger warning. The R word that I'm not allowed to use apparently on YouTube, I didn't know that, but okay, I'm not allowed to use it, so I won't. The R word, when it comes to abuse, occurs in this book. And so if that is something that might trigger you, please be warned before you go into it. Also, if you have suffered any kind of abuse, whether it be verbal, physical, psychological, from someone that is older, this book may trigger you. A little bit about me. I don't really like to talk too much about my personal life, but a little bit about me. I have suffered abuse from older people, so it did trigger me a little bit, but I still think that the book was really well done. I ended up giving the book 5 stars, and I do believe it is incredibly important to read. So in case you're wondering how I found out about this book, my favourite booktuber, Murphy Napier, who I finally named in my birthday video, so yay, I can finally say her name again. Murphy Napier recommended this. She received a book arc of this book, and then she did a review of the book arc that she received, keeping in mind that the book had not yet officially been published, so it was a spoiler free. And I really appreciated that review, and I appreciated how much she was saying that people need to read it for the sake of the subject matter. And I completely agree. While this book is incredibly dark in many, many, many ways, and it deals with incredibly tough subject matters, and it can potentially be very triggering, especially for those who have been through abuse before. As I said, whether it be verbal, physical, psychological, it does come up in this book, and gaslighting as well comes up in this book. It is very important, a very important book to read because of the subject matter, because it's not spoken about enough. There is one con that I want to say about this book, and that is that at the beginning of this book, when Vanessa goes to school, she is at a boarding school, so she's in a boarding room, and she has a boarding house mother or something like that, who ends up passing around whistles to the girls, just in case of an emergency. They have a whistle on them. One of the girls says something like, "What about the boys? Do they get one?" And everyone seems to laugh and say, "Why would the boys need a whistle?" I didn't appreciate that. I would love to have a writer write an abuse book about a guy who goes through abuse, because this is something that does happen. It doesn't just happen to women. And this is not me getting on my soapbox. This is just me saying I would like to read something like that, because it needs to be known that it doesn't just happen to women. That being said, this book is a fantastic portrayal, a fantastic portrayal of abuse, and going through it at such a young age and not really understanding it, to the adult side of Vanessa and her really starting to come to terms with what actually happened in that relationship. So if you don't feel you'll be triggered by reading this book, I highly recommend it because of how important the subject matter is. I end up giving this book 5 stars. So what that means, if you've been keeping up with my ratings, is that I have completely read 5 books so far this month, and all of those 5 books have received 5 stars. I picked up, I believe I picked up 6 or 7. I think I picked up 7 books so far this month. 2 were DNF'd. 5 of them received 5 stars. So I'm having an amazing month reading wise. Now let's move on to what I'm going to be reading for week 3 in May, starting off with a book that I've already began. What is it? You'll find out in just a moment. So the first book that I'll be reading for week 3 of May 2020 is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, continuing on with my Harry Potter series, and I'm really enjoying this so far, especially after reading my Dark Vanessa. I needed something a little more light to get into, and so the fact that I've not only read this book, but that arguably Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is one of my favourite books in the entire series, fills me with a lot of joy, because I needed something a little more light compared to my Dark Vanessa. That's not to say that Harry doesn't go through abuse with the Dursleys that he lives with. He does, but it is much lighter in comparison to my Dark Vanessa. So I am already here up to chapter 3, so page 29, and I'm really enjoying it so far. So yay. So I'm going to keep reading this book. Today's Sunday. I'm going to get about 1/3 of the way through tonight. Then I'll get 2/3 of the way through on Monday, and then on Tuesday I will finish off this book. Then on Wednesday I will be picking up this book at long, long, long last. Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. I am so excited to read this book, because if you've been following my channel, you can see behind me that, like, this book right here, the gold and brown book that I'm trying to point to, that one right there. That one. Yep. Which is the Heroes of Olympus, The Lost Hero. That book behind me I read 2 months ago, and it was a return to the Percy Jackson world, first book in that series, the Lost Hero series, and I gave it 5 stars and loved it so much. Then when I found out it was a return to the Percy Jackson series, I had two options. I could either continue on with that series, or I could go back to where it all began with the very first Percy Jackson book, and clearly you can see which one won. It took a little while for this book to come into my bookstore, which is why I did not read anything Percy Jackson in April, but I'm very excited to be getting to this one during this next week, week 3 of May 2020, and yay, I'm just really looking forward to it. This is I don't even know. I'm going to say it's either a young adult or middle grade fantasy, but I don't know. But I know for sure that it is a fantasy. I'm not going to read the blurb. I don't want to know anything about this. I want to go into this book completely blind, and I'm so excited. Rick Riordan has set me up in a very big, really good way with the book behind me, The Heroes of Olympus, The Lost Hero, with all of the Greek and Roman mythology that he included in that book. So I can't wait to see what he did with the very first book in the series that started all this off. This book and this series, the Percy Jackson series, is a really popular series, and apparently there's even a movie that's come out about it that I have not seen, or an adaptation of the book to film that has come out that I've not seen yet. So I know nothing about this going in, but I'm really incredibly excited to see how I go with this book. And then once I've read the book, I am going to watch the film as well. And yeah, then I'll get to be able to talk about it with you guys. So this is the second book that I'm going to be reading in week 3 of May 2020. I'll be starting it on Wednesday, and I don't know when I'll finish it, but I'll finish it somewhere along the way. And then I'll pick up my third book in week 3 of May 2020, and that book is this book, Divergent by Veronica Roth. Now, I do still have the same cover that I had with my May TBR, as you can see if you watched that one. I'm not a fan of this cover. I don't like covers that show movie scenes. I much prefer to have the original cover, and I'm going to do what I can to get the original cover, but I don't think I'm going to get it on time by the time I start reading this, so that's okay. I'll just deal with that. I have seen this film maybe 2 or 3 times, and I absolutely love it. It is a dystopian, and as you guys know, with my reading of The Selection, which is right there, the girl in the green dress right behind me. It's hard to point when you're going backwards. And I read The Elite this month as well, and next month I'm going to read The One. I love my dystopians, and I also read another dystopian, and I'm trying to work out what the heck it was, The Hunger Games. I read The Hunger Games a couple of weeks ago, and that's a dystopian as well. One of my favorite things about dystopians is the caste/class systems in them, and having seen the film of that was adapted from this book, I really love the caste/class systems in the Divergent film, in the very first Divergent film. So while I have not read this book, I'm certainly not going into this book blind at all. I know all the factions. I can't remember all of them, but I know that our main character, Triss, ends up going into Dauntless, and my favourite faction is Kandor, so I know, or Kandar, but it's spelled Kandor. Anyway, I'm going to let that go. But I love the different factions. I love how they end up in the factions. So I haven't read the book, but I know the bones of this story, and I'm really excited to actually be reading it. And if I really enjoy it, then I will move on to the next book, which I do not remember what it is called. There are 3 books and 3 films, and I've seen all of the films, so I most likely will probably go on to the next one. Next month, we'll see how we go. But that is a wrap. So once again, in week 2 of May 2020, I read Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and I gave this book 5 stars. I picked up and got halfway through The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington and DNF'd this book. And then I picked up Kate Elizabeth Russell's My Dark Vanessa, and as tough as it was to read, this book deserved 5 stars as well. And for the rest of this week, I'm going to be reading Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Just going to move the tussle out the way there. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, as well as Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan, and then Divergent by Veronica Roth. So, if you'd like to buddy read with me, those are the books that I'll be reading this week. If you buddy read with me last week, let me know how you went with those 3 books, or if you read something else, let me know what you're reading currently and how your reading experience is going. I hope your month of May reading experience is going as well as mine. To have only 5-star rated books outside of the books I DNF'd is incredible. I didn't think that this would ever happen, but it's a wonderful start, and I'm kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm kind of waiting for the 1-star book or the 3-star book, but so far, it's been an amazing experience. So I'm going to leave that there and let you guys go. Peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Monday, Thursday, and Sunday, with reviews on Mondays, generally speaking, midweek reviews on Thursdays, generally speaking, and end of week wrap-ups on Fridays. So I'll see you again very soon. Mwah! Happy reading. Bye, guys. Bye.